Welcome to Riverview Credit Union Mid-Ohio Valley Entrepreneurship Expo at Marietta College. I am Dr. Jacqueline Khorassani, Director of Entrepreneurship Program at Marietta College. As most of you know, during the past 3 months, we have been delivering the MOVEE gradually via a series of webinars. This is our last session in the year 2020. I know we all want to put 2020 behind us. So there we go. Next year, we will return with online, in-person, and/or hybrid programming, depending on the status of COVID and the vaccine. To learn more about our future programs, please visit marietta.edu/MOVEE-expo-program. The MOVEE is supported by Marietta College along with our community partners such as Riverview Credit Union, our title sponsor, Clutch MOVEE, our in-kind platinum sponsor, and our gold sponsors, Schwendeman Agency and McDonough Foundation. Silver sponsors, Premier Bank and Tech Growth Ohio, and finally, bronze sponsors, Trademark Solutions and Tenney and Associates. It is in part due to the generous contribution of our sponsors that we are able to offer our sessions to all free of charge. The overall theme of this year's conference is learning from challenges, how to adapt and become a resilient business. We invited today's guest, Kaeya Majmundar, mostly because we were impressed by her creativity, her hard work, her determination, and her resiliency. In short, we were impressed by her entrepreneurial mindset. Kaeya is a young serial entrepreneur who received a Shark Tank deal while she was still in college. In a minute, we'll start a very informal and casual conversation with Kaeya. But before we do that, I would like to invite my co-moderators to unmute themselves and turn their videos on and introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Kobe Hewlett, and I'm a business management major, and I'm a junior.
Hi, I'm Spencer. I'm currently exploring majors, and I'm the class of 2024.
Kobe and Spencer will join us during the second half of our conversation to ask their own questions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Kaeya Majmundar to our virtual stage. Kaeya, I know that you're very busy and we really appreciate you giving us this time. This is really something that we were looking forward to. We are going to make this very, very, very casual. Let's pretend that we are at the coffee shop somewhere, drinking coffee and talking mostly about you and your journey as an entrepreneur. Let's go back to your childhood. Did you have that entrepreneurial spirit then too, or this is something that you gradually developed over time?
I definitely had a creative and entrepreneurial spirit, but I didn't necessarily identify it as that. So I would do things like try to sell lemonade or try to clean my grandmother's earrings and rings in exchange for a trip to the ice cream store, always trying to hustle something for some sort of reward, but not necessarily starting companies. I would say I started my first company or project, rather I would call it, while I was in high school when I tried to create something like a common app for graduate school applications. And it was really more of just a passion project with a friend of mine. You know, I didn't even really know the word entrepreneurship until I got to college. Daughter of 2 doctors, always I guess had the itch, but didn't really know it.
Parents, did they welcome your entrepreneurial spirit or were they against it somehow? What was their thinking?
I think basically my parents and probably any parents really just want to see their kids succeed. And startups are just breeding grounds for failure. You're signing up for something where there's a much higher likelihood of you failing than succeeding. That probably made my parents a little bit uncomfortable. But the cool thing was that as I started actually succeeding, then all of a sudden the support kind of followed. And I think that's totally fair. Earn the buy-in from your parents.
Okay, let's fast forward. Let's move on to college. You went to Emory University and majored in economics and sociology. How did you end up at that university, and how did you choose those two majors, and how were you as a student, all of that stuff?
Always growing up, I was actually honestly pretty against the formal education system. I always thought that classroom learning was not the way to actually learn practical skills. And I was always more so seeking that opportunity to learn more practical skills in real life. And I felt like I wasn't the best student because it was more of memorizing material and spitting it out on an exam to me wasn't going to teach me anything. And so that's kind of how I was in high school as well. I mean, I was always a good student though. I was still getting A's and B's, whatever, but didn't, really found the most of my learning happened outside of the classroom, even starting in high school. And the classroom was really just an opportunity for me to learn and just be more well-rounded and knowledgeable in general. I liked learning from my teachers, but didn't necessarily think that it was the only way to learn from me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Then when I got to college, I was pre-med, being the daughter of two doctors, didn't really know that there was actually anything else. I actually got into quite a few schools and I was deciding between going to University of Chicago or Emory, which is in Atlanta, and decided to go to Emory specifically because I wanted to explore the bounds of liberal arts. Economics at U Chicago, for example, is very, math driven, textbook driven. The school is a lot more rigorous with academics, whereas Emory was a little bit more liberal when it came to avenues to explore outside of academics. Chose Emory. I was still pre-med at the time, and then I just accidentally stumbled into my first startup, and then I switched from pre-med to economics and sociology after that happened. And the reason was because I just realized that, economics and sociology was kind of like studying money and people, which, are the best vehicles to success in the startup world.
You changed your major after Shark Tank then? They didn't have other majors closer to like entrepreneurship, or you didn't want to go that far?
They didn't have startup kind of support and resources there at the time. I think they were growing it. There was a club. I also just don't think that majoring in entrepreneurship, if that's even a major, is necessarily the best way to learn how to build a startup. It's really just doing it. So I actually wanted to choose something that was a little bit more secure with a career path. Like economics has other career paths, whereas entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily have other career paths associated with it. Something that's a little bit more tactical and you kind of learn, still very kind of math and science driven than startups necessarily are. So that's the reason I chose economics. They do have a business school at Emory, but by that time that I switched, I was too late.
So it's just a side, because we do have an entrepreneurship major at Marietta College, and it's really more like a general business major with a dose of creativity and communication, but it still prepares you for whatever you want to do after graduation in the business world. If you want to work for someone right out of college, it just has more creativity and it enhances your communication skills and also your ability to solve problems creatively. So let's just move on. Take us through that journey. Before that, there was a competition at the college level. Is that how it started?
I actually applied to a pitch competition, which I highly recommend any college students do. And especially if you are majoring in entrepreneurship, that's a great opportunity to really get trained on how to succeed at these pitch competitions, how to enter them, and you probably have more resources to actually participate in them. And so for me, I found a pitch competition because I had just invented my first product and I decided that I thought it might be an interesting idea for me to join it. I ended up winning that pitch competition and ended up being one of the largest, if not the largest, national collegiate pitch competition at the time. And then that's what really ended up opening the doors for me. That's where I started to learn that what entrepreneurship even was. And after that happened, my dad just casually mentioned one day that, hey, have you ever heard of the show Shark Tank? And at the time I hadn't, because I wasn't even at all in the world. And so I took a look at it and then I started studying it. So I was watching episodes and taking notes on successful pitches and not successful pitches and why some were better than others and why deals happened versus didn't happen. And then I decided to apply.
So then this was external. It wasn't a competition on campus, right?
Yeah, because Emory didn't have a program. So
Nothing like that. Oh, so you just so were you the only one from your school?
yeah, so they do have school chapters. We didn't have a school chapter, so I was not part of one of the chapters.
I'm really interested. You were young. You were 19. Fears, excitements, all kind of emotions running through you. Take us through that journey.
So first off, when my dad said you should watch this show, it was really just to watch it, right? So I watched it and I liked it and I thought it would be interesting to apply. And so that was, over the summer. And then one day I was sitting in class actually and just decided to apply while I was in class. What ended up happening was it was just a short form online at the time. So submitted that form. And then I want to say 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from someone in LA thinking that it was, someone I saw the caller ID thinking it was one of my cousins, and it just turned out to be one of the producers. When that happened, I was pretty excited, but I mean, it's a very, very long process, as some of you might know, that it's a very extensive, very competitive process with like a less than 1% acceptance rate or something. Was just kind of going through it day by day, and I got to the point where they have you submit a casting video. After having watched all the episodes, I realized that the most important thing for me was actually going to be entertainment. And so then the goal and the whole plan for me completely switched over to how can I be the most entertaining pitch. In that casting video, I actually went skydiving. It was a pretty crazy casting video. It was really fun to make. I was a sophomore and I was playing with my friends and we made this crazy video. And then after that, it was maybe another 2 or 3 months. And by the time summer rolled around, I was going to LA to film this pitch. At the time, it was just me. I was still pre-med, right? So it was like a college kid who invented a product, but really at the time it was just a cardboard box that I had gotten from Home Depot and made some cuts in it. So it wasn't really a product. I hadn't thought much about it. It was just a fun project. By the time I got to the point where they were like, all right, Kaeya, you're going to go pitch now, I actually wasn't at all prepared for any of the questions that I might be asked. I was just kind of having fun with it. And I think that saved a lot of the anxiety and pressure. It didn't get fully real until I was being hammered on the show. And then I think once you're being hammered and attacked, then you start going into, oh God, this is really stressful. But I didn't know, I wasn't expecting any of this until I was actually standing in front of these guys.
Did you rehearse or it was just one shot?
So basically the way it works is that they do prep you with the 2-minute pitch, right? So you have one opportunity to get through your 2-minute pitch that you memorize. And if you stumble through it, then you stumble through it. Luckily, I didn't stumble through it, but what did happen is that I was demoing something and the set broke, and that wasn't intentional. It wasn't supposed to happen. So we had to pause it and then reset it and then work that into the episode. That was really the only thing that was prepared.
So you are in that room and these people, sharks, are sitting in front of you. My students have watched that episode. They really complimented you and they said, wow, at your age, you're really doing well, this and that. But they were also not so kind in other ways. I remember specifically when you had a little bit back and forth exchange with Mark Cuban about opportunity costs that we learn about in econ. So I don't know, you say you were not paying attention in class, but I think you were because you defined it so well. And then Kevin and also Barbara gave you a little bit of a hard time. How did you feel during and after all that?
I don't honestly remember too much because it's like kind of PTSD because it was very stressful and you kind of, it's just like you don't remember exactly what it was like. But I will say that I just knew that I had to get a deal and I could not get a deal. And so I was just like, whatever I had to do to get the deal. And I went pretty far when it comes to like borderline begging for it. But I think that's the thing, right? Is that's startups to begin with in a nutshell. You have to be willing to do literally whatever it takes no matter what. And a lot of times that sentence carries a lot of weight. your willingness to sacrifice your time to this business, your relationships to this business, your pride to this business is something that you saw on my episode, right? Like really sacrificing, going to no end to get that deal. So in terms of how that felt at the time when I was pitching, I didn't care as much because it didn't really occur to me. But then after the episode aired, there was a lot of talk about how, wow, she was begging for a deal. And that felt a little bit embarrassing and whatnot. You would think that that was the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me, but it wasn't, because this is like literally trying to grow your business is the most sensitive and embarrassing thing, a lot of moments like that every day. So I'm used to it at this point.
So we are going to talk about some of those, hopefully the ones that you want to share. And we want to know how you deal with those failures. A lot of people think that that comes with experience and people in your age group. And that was what year was that?
It was in 2015, I believe, is when it aired.
So 5 years ago. Anyway, so that we get there. And anytime you want to share with us any examples of how you dealt with failures, we want to learn from that. But you did get a deal from Lori. So take us through what happened afterwards.
She called me right after, well, of course, so the timeline is a little bit different, right? Because the timeline when it actually happened versus when it aired is totally different. In a nutshell, she called me, very supportive of the deal, like very excited for the next steps. It was a lot of paperwork and a lot of diligence. I think what people don't really realize is two things. One is a lot of things change afterwards. So when you're on the show, it's a handshake and it's more of a TV deal. So when you see $50,000 for 20% of your company, that's not a real deal that anyone could actually do for their business, because they would die not being able to raise more capital because they've now given up their entire business for a tiny amount of money. That's not how it works. For the TV deals, this money exchange is really just, like I said, for TV, and then you actually negotiate what is it really going to be after the show. So it was around, I want to say, 6 to 9 months of back and forth on what it was really going to be, partially because it took 6 to 9 months, or even maybe it might have been 11 months from the time that I pitched to the time that I actually aired. I think it was a full year. That was a very lengthy process. We just kind of figured out what the best structure for working together would be. And it ended up not being a cash exchange like that. So I think the stat is like 60% of the deals are completely changed. In our case, it was really more of a partnership where I got help figuring out the manufacturing and the shipping, making stuff in China to getting them over to here to distributing it into retailers. And so that's my version of the startup major, right? Or the entrepreneurship major. I got it that way.
Okay, so money didn't exchange hands, but you did get support from Lori and I guess her team. And so you took this busy box to market. Where did you sell it?
In a ton of physical stores, so nothing online. I tried to do online distribution for the product actually more recently, but it was too hard. It's a storage company. I mean, at that point rather, that was all being done through like Home Depot and Lowe's and Staples and Ace Hardware, so it was a completely physical distribution play. So we tried to do the e-commerce, and this product just is not suited for e-commerce. And the reason is because the weight of the shipping and the size of the box, you just can't make it work economically. We tried it for a period of time, but it ended up being a complete physical distribution play.
What is the status of that?
So that was like 7 years ago, right? So businesses have a lifetime of 3 to 5 years. I moved on from that quite a long time ago. Although I did just sell the last bit of inventory that I ended up having, and I'm actually moving that over to the retailer next week.
And you were still in college. Any problem balancing the two activities?
My grades certainly suffered. I wasn't going to drop out. That wasn't going to be the case, because I do think having the degree is very, very important. You always need that at least as a fallback. I wouldn't recommend that anyone drops out of college, but I worked with my teachers to figure out how I could change my schedule when I was flying to God knows where to distribute my product to whatever retailers it was, or going to trade shows. But it was always an in tandem effort.
After graduation, doors opened up to you opportunities because of your experience as a startup business. Tell us what happened. What were the opportunities that were offered to you, and which one did you take, and what did you do?
After graduating, I had a pretty long introspective kind of conversation with myself to figure out what I wanted to do. And I wasn't particularly excited about that product. I mean, I got on Shark Tank for it, and that's why people know me for it. But from the very beginning, it was just a project. It was just kind of like not really intentional. What I realized was that from that experience, what I really loved more than anything else was the fact that it got on Shark Tank and the fact that all of a sudden overnight I had this explosive demand for the product. And so what I realized was I am really more so product agnostic, meaning I don't care about the product that I'm selling, but I really loved that process. And I was like, if I could bottle that up and unleash it onto really any product, now, I'm doing something pretty exciting. And so what I decided to do after graduating college was, after having been on Shark Tank, I used that check mark, I guess, that I'm a Shark Tank entrepreneur, to go partner with celebrities and influencers as co-founders of various product brands, like e-commerce brands. And I would do the whole back end of, from what I learned from Lori and Shark Tank, of going and sourcing the product, coming up with the brand name, building the storefront, selling to customers, and doing the customer service and all that. And I would go partner with celebrities and influencers to say, okay, what product do you want to build? How are we going to sell it to your fan base? Which one makes most sense for your fan base? And continuously create a bunch of these products with them. And what I would do is figure out, okay, like using their voice to drive sales for these products. So after graduating, it was over the course of 3 years, I developed probably 7 to 8 e-commerce brands. Almost all of them, I would say, or if not all of them, ended up going viral. We were able to drive 6 figures in revenue over the course of 2 to 3 months, if not shorter, for each of these brands. And we would just grow like a bunch of these e-commerce brands.
Give us some examples.
So like anything, I'll start with the partners. So one of the partners was Derrick Rose he plays for the NBA. At the time, he was a Chicago Bulls player. We created a merchandise line for him. I did a similar thing with Steve Harvey, the comedian. I did pillows with another influencer, a skincare line with another influencer. All sorts of things.
You have a big project right now, but I also learned about something you do for high school students. Is that Lean Gap?
After having gone on Shark Tank, I always get asked to do these kinds of things, or how do I start a company? And so I teamed up with 5 friends of mine about 5 years ago, and we started a high school summer camp that basically takes you from idea to product to pitch in 4 to 6 weeks. So I've been running that camp with my friends every year for 5 years, and it's really fun. We rent out some campus every time, some dorms. So it was in Boston, and then it moved to San Francisco. So yeah, that's a fun thing that we do every year.
How can I'm not in high school, but how can people who are interested get involved or attend this camp?
Leangap.org is the website, but it's for high school students. They can enroll. We take around 40 to 50 every year. We always have like hundreds or if not thousands of applicants.
Sway Pay. Tell us a little bit about that. That's concept, this whole thing sounds very interesting to me. Don't know much about it.
If you're following the journey, started in college, was really enamored by this idea of going viral using a TV show or whatever, then moved following that desire. I decided to go partner with celebrities and build e-commerce brands with celebrities. And through that experience, just realized, was trying to figure out how to continuously make products go viral or just replicate and get these products to kind of share themselves, like kind of like a viral chain of growth and awareness for your product. Along that process, I discovered this idea for treating social influence as currency. What ended up happening was, for one of our storefronts, which was actually the skincare line, I had partnered with an influencer. Just like Shark Tank and just like celebrities, when they post about something, it goes very viral and then it dies. And so my goal was to figure out, okay, how do you have a scalable, repeatable way that happens over a longer period of time, and it's more cost effective as well. And so the idea was that at the time it was like, okay, well, if people were purchasing, and then you could guarantee that X number of your purchases were actually being shared as well in a meaningful way, and those were being shared and being shared and being shared over the course of several half-lives, as if you could call them, then the business could kind of just grow itself. In that line of thought, I decided, okay, well, we're gonna treat social media posts featuring our products as currency to our storefronts. The way that worked in the beginning was very simple. We have a skincare product, it's $50. You get it for 50% off if you promise to post an unboxing video on YouTube after receiving your item. And that turned into a very, very powerful engine for us, a growth engine, because what ended up happening was that now, rather than spending too much money on Facebook ads or influencers or celebrities or whatever it was, we were now, rather than going through a middleman, we were going directly to the customers, directly to the shoppers, and exchanging that value. And essentially shoppers were becoming the ad units, and we could basically pass off all of the money that we were spending on advertisements to our customers. It ended up just becoming a very synergistic, really good growth driver for us. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Slack, for example, is very famous for having been spun out of a mother company. So there was a company, they were actually building a gaming company, and they had to build some sort of messaging tool for the people in the game. And then that messaging tool ended up becoming Slack. So it was kind of this evolution where we decided to spin out this program into its own technical product, which is SwayPay, which basically plugs into any online retailer and allows shoppers to earn the best discounts by plugging in their Instagram handle, getting a specific discount according to their social influence, and then checking out with that discount and then posting on Instagram featuring their order after receiving the item.
What is the status of SwayPay right now? Where are we? Is it available now? Is it?
Yep. So basically, for this company, it was definitely going to require a lot more capital, a lot more resources, a lot more investment. This wasn't like my other businesses where I could build it and sell the product and get it up and running just by myself. This was going to take a very large technical lift. This was a lot of legal regulations. If you're creating a new currency, it's an iceberg. And so I ended up spending some time learning first how to build a tech company, because that's just a whole nother breed of startups. And so I spent some time learning that as a product manager at a very fast growing hyper growth kind of company, which is something that I recommend anyone to do if they're interested in getting into tech startup or starting their own tech company. I would say first go be a product manager at a company to kind of learn. You get to be the CEO of a product or a project within a larger tech company. So I did that first for about a year. And then I decided to leave that and take all the learnings from there to apply it to SwayPay. So around January 2019 is when I really started the company. Obviously, this idea had been stewing in my head for many years. I spent the first 3 or 4 months just doing market research, just talking to customers and designing what I thought would be the best possible solution based on what customers were saying, going and getting pre-orders, customers that were going to sign up on a wait list, which was very important to me to get that validation. Then I went to go raise venture capital. The market for raising venture capital is very, very tough as well. I think less than 1% of founders who try to go raise venture capital money actually are able to raise it. And of those, less than 2% of them are women. So, I had a lot going up against me in that regard. Luckily, I actually had a pretty easy time doing it myself because I had the past history of building my other startups. And so we have raised, quite a bit of money from venture capitalists. We also have money from Barclays, the bank, and we have recently launched the product. We're live on, I think, around 50 retailers right now, and things are going pretty great right now.
Do you think that's important for people to have mentors, or is it more up to you how you want to do your business and you have to kind of basically learn from your own mistakes as you go? Nobody can tell you what to do, what not to do. Where's your head on this whole idea?
And I think it's an interesting perspective perspective actually that I have, especially talking to younger folks who are in college right now. I think the truth of the matter is that nobody knows what they're doing. When you're looking for mentorship, just keep that in mind, that even your mentors don't really know what they're doing. And so my best piece of advice, or the thing that I've internalized the most, is that don't look for mentors, but look for investors. And when I say investors, I mean investment in the form of time, which is quote unquote mentorship, investors in the form of money, investors in the form of introductions, and treat it like investors, not like this is a mentor-mentee relationship, but this is more of a partnership, that you are investing in this business and we're in this together, or investing in this journey. When you start the relationship off like that, more on a level playing field, and you basically realize that, okay, this mentor, this investor, this advisor has this, but I have this, right? And they don't have what I have, and they have what I don't have. And so it's much more of an equal relationship. And I think something that I learned from Shark Tank was that I looked too much up to Lori. She's a celebrity and that's great and everything, but the truth, she doesn't necessarily know what she's doing either. A lot of it has to do with luck. A lot of it has to do with timing and positioning and the amount of time that you spend doing something. Spend the time and find the right investors and treat it like a partnership more than like a teacher, mentor-mentee relationship.
All right. So Kobe and Spencer, are you there? We want to join us.
Hi, Kaeya.
What's up?
Not much. So Lori's, like you said, she's a mentor or like a partner, but I'm guessing you've had more mentors and partners along the line. So what's the biggest piece of advice that you've received from one of these people?
I would say the biggest piece of advice is to trust your gut. I know this sounds like ridiculous, but the truth is that going back to what I was just saying, is that I spend the most time with the business. And so I actually know what's best for the business. There are very few times where somebody else steers me in a direction that was better than my own direction that I was thinking anyway. What I've learned to do over time is stop asking too many questions from too many people. They'll steer you in way too many different directions, and then indecision is actually what kills the business. So trust your gut and decide super fast.
I have a question. So how was it working with Derrick Rose and on the Zip Tanks, and also like Vic Mensa wearing it at Coachella? How did that make you feel?
It was amazing. Honestly, that was the best years of my life. Like, we would party at night, do business at day, every day for like 2 years. So much fun. Honestly, the best years of my life.
You went to a lot of Vic Mensa concerts and stuff like that?
Not Vic Mensa concerts per se, and I don't think he had a lot, but I would with Derrick, right? We were kind of both in Chicago, and so I would go to basketball games, or I would go hang out, or go to the clubs, or whatever it was, just have a good time.
So I have another question. How can a restaurant market social media space for profit?
How to utilize, I guess, social media to help their business?
I think the food is actually a really big opportunity in general with restaurants, because it's very high margin business. The cost of giving food away for free is really low, and the ROI that you get on food posts always go viral. And so I think there's obviously the traditional route of running Instagram ads or social media ads. That's one route. But I think that there's a really, really lucrative opportunity to give discounts in exchange for posts like SwayPay or whatever it is, giving free food away, because that's just like the lowest hanging fruit.
So a lot of kids in college, they're unsure about their future. So what's your best piece of advice for those kids who are unsure about what's going to happen next?
If you have uncertainty, keep exploring. I think that you can try something and fail over and over and over again, even into your late 20s. I don't care if I fail at this business. So what? I'm 27, I'm 28. That's, when you're kind of starting careers anyway, time is on your side. So go explore, get creative. For 3 years after graduating college, 4 years, I was trying everything, doing everything, building businesses with all sorts of different people, failing at some of them, doing really well at other ones. I would spend days not working. I would party too hard and then just not be able to work for the day. And it doesn't matter, because you're still really young. And so don't take it too seriously. Go pursue your curiosities and explore those. And I think now being 27 and now knowing really very clearly what I love the most would not have happened had I not really gone and explored that stuff.
Where do you get this positive attitude toward failure? Okay, it doesn't matter if I fail. Because a lot of us, even older people, We fail and we just kind of fall apart. Where does that come from? Where does that strength come from?
I don't think anyone enjoys failing. It's more of like you fail fast, and it is true that the more you fail, you're never going to know what's going to work, but it's really valuable to know what's not going to work. You just go down this path and you realize, oh, it's not going to work. It's not really a failure. It's more of like, oh, like gotta turn. And that happens all the time with me too. Like on a daily basis, every day, every second of every day, something breaks or something doesn't work. And you just use that as an opportunity to figure out where to turn. It's just signals. So I think no matter how big or small the failure is, it's cliche, but it's not actually failure. It's literally a lesson on what's not going to work. And so you change it. And again, like when you're this young, I mean, I'm not as young anymore, but when you're in your 20s, early 20s.
You're young. Stop.
Yeah, like who cares? Like, great. Like, nothing's gonna happen to you. What's the worst that can happen? You go drive Uber. I babysat dogs on Rover for 3 months or 4 months, and I was making a ton of money doing that. They're just like so easy ways to make money that like there's almost no excuse at this point to not be making, at least being able to put a roof over your head.
Have you ever looked back and said, oh, maybe I should have gone to medical school?
I don't think about it. And that's the great thing, right? Is that I learned what I didn't like very early. There is nothing I would rather do, even if that means I never make $1 from any of my startups. I would still go babysit dogs on Rover so I could do what I get to do on a regular basis.
Where do you see yourself in the future?
I'm in this like 40-person office right now. So I would really, really love to fill that out, and have a full-blown team to come and work with every day and scale a business.
What kind of people do you want on your team?
Just smart people. That's the only qualification. Are you smart? And do you hustle? Although that's less, actually, it's funny. I would have said that 3 years ago. Now, when you're actually scaling a company, being smart is more important than hustling and being scrappy. But like in the very beginning, you need people who are going to hustle. Then as you start to grow, you need experts. Like you need real experts to tackle your growth challenges. And so that's why smarts is more important to me than hustle right now.
How were you able to make contact with the celebrities? Like, can you give an example of the process of doing that?
It was a lot of hustle. I guess an example would be with Derek Rose. So we were both in Chicago, and very long story short, he was walking somewhere and there were a lot of people kind of crowding him and saying, hey, can I get a picture? Can I get a picture? And I instead said, hey, let's start a business together. And I gave him my card and I said, here, I think this is a great idea for business. Like it was 30 seconds. And, it actually happened. With Steve Harvey, it was a conversation in an elevator, just saying, hey, like, want to start a business together? Like, these people are regular people. Not to say that you necessarily have these opportunities to be in contact, especially in the Corona world, but these conversations can manifest over LinkedIn too. I mean, or God knows where. I've also done crazier things. Like I have thrown products at Beyonce on stage and outside of her office to try to do the same thing. But, she's on another level. That kind of stuff doesn't work for Beyonce. You would like to think it does. Yeah, all sorts of crazy ways.
And then Belle is asking, to what do you attribute your success?
I would say 2 things. One is always having had the safety net and the support from my parents, such that failure wasn't really something that was all that much of an option for me, because whether it was the ability for me to support myself through creative ways, regardless of that, I always knew that worst case scenario, I would be able to be at my parents' house, which is where I ended up with quarantine anyway. When the fear of failure no longer really exists, it's just a mental shift that I could do anything. The lowest I can fall is with my parents. They would embrace me for that. And then the second thing I would say is just persisting. So I can't say that I persisted hardcore with any of the individual startups that I had, right? They had short lifetimes, and it was always the case. That was the model. Hit it and quit it over and over and over again with all these products. But what I continued with was this model, right? I was doing it for 3, 4, 5 years until I hit what I believe today to be a true venture scale type massive potential business. I think with physical products, it's a little bit harder to do that. And so, obviously tech startups is a whole nother world where it's like, you really are trying to build $1 billion company. That journey is very long and hard too, obviously. And I'm at the very beginning of it, but I just stuck with it.
We started this whole series of webinars back in September, and our very first speaker tried to define, he says, persistence patience and resiliency is not about being stubborn and keep on doing things the same way, but not giving up. You should also learn how to give up. It's all about looking at stuff with fresh set of eyes and decide when to pivot, basically, which is what you are saying.
Have role models been important? If so, how do you identify them?
Huge for me, just like having successful entrepreneurs and folks to look up to has been big along my journey, and they've shifted. Who they are have shifted over time as my business has also shifted. So for example, in the very beginning, it was role models in, the e-commerce world. Always the underlying role model is always Beyonce for me. But like, if we were to talk about any non-Beyonce, it shifted from, like e-commerce business owners. Now, I've shifted more to role models who have built billion-dollar companies outside of just Steve Jobs and your Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who as, Apple and Google founders, but founders that I've even interacted with who are going through this process and building their companies at light speed, which I would love to do. But I do think it's very important to identify people at various stages of your life and look up to them and follow their path, mainly for the purpose of knowing that this journey is hard for everyone. It's long for everyone. I think that's part of why I could keep going, because I knew that I wasn't doing it alone.
I can't end this before asking you, what about Beyonce impresses you so much?
She sets precedents for everything she does. So she's typically the first to start whatever it is, whether they're trends or whatever it is. She's also somebody who, if you're talking about, as I personally really admire work ethic. And then I think from a larger kind of global standpoint, it seems like she is a real force multiplier for good and somebody who inspires other people to work really hard and be good people. And I think that's really, really important and needed, especially now.
Thank you. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Spencer and Kobe. These are busy times for students and everybody else. Appreciate our time with you, Kaeya. Thank you.
Thank you so
Until next time, everyone. Bye.